This video is going to be about the wrongful slut shaming of Rhaenyra in House of the Dragon. Not only am I going to be talking about this shaming in the show, but the overall fandom as well. My main point being that this shaming is not justified and is frankly a double standard. Let's get into it. Now, why does slut shaming exist for Rhaenyra specifically? Well, first we have to look at the views of the society as a whole to understand why Rhaenyra is judged this way. Obviously, we can all agree that in this society, sexual freedom is looked down on to control women. And while this bias does exist against men, it's not to the same extent as it is against women. Rhaenyra's maidenhood is glorified and she is obliged to marry even though she does not want to. In the book, who takes Rhaenyra's maidenhood is given a lot of focus and emphasis, and the maesters speculate whether she offered it to Cole or Harwin took it. A big part of House of the Dragon was the fact that Rhae has bastards, but Aegon has his own. Of course, for Aegon, it's a little bit different since he's not claiming that his bastards are trueborn, but again, there isn't a discussion of how Aegon is a whore. Viserys and Daemon talk about how they went to multiple brothels before they were married, and Daemon still goes to brothels, which would be an obscenity if he was a woman. One of the most insidious ways these stereotypes perpetuate themselves is the fact that other women propagate these ideas as well. Take Alicent as an example. Alicent makes Rhae's virginity her whole business, and this is very natural for her to do. She's been taught to be pure her whole life, and to watch her friend go against these core values would be disheartening. This is the key factor which drives a wedge in between the relationship, which shows you how toxic this idea really is. For Alicent, sex is seen as a duty and something to not be pleasurable. This is why we have the contrast of the sex scenes in the brothel and in the Red Keep. Daemon grooms Rhaenyra by saying that sex can be intimate and fun, while Alicent never gets to experience this. Rhaenyra has also been told that her duty is to be married and pop out kids. Doing what she wants sexually goes against that idea. Her own mother told her this shortly before she died during childbirth. She specifically tells Alicent that's something that she doesn't want to do, and Alicent gets sad because that's the life she already is being forced to have. And this is why Rhaenyra is being shamed for being a whore. It keeps her in this neat little box where her husband will be able to control her. This is exactly what happens to Alicent. I'm not shaming Alicent for being this way. She's obviously just reciting what's been told to her and the ways in which she is forced to live her life. You can definitely argue that she's a grown woman and therefore should be able to reflect on the fact that sexism is tearing her friendship apart. There's no way she would be able to discern this while being a child. You have to realize that Alicent is operating from the perspective of the king, the perspective of Otto, and the perspective of the Seven. If she breaks away from her strict morality on sex, then her whole childhood was a lie and she's defying her late husband and father, let alone her religious beliefs. Now, is she still wrong? Yes, but we have to evaluate why Alicent acts in this way, and it gives us good insight into the slut shaming in that universe from a woman's perspective. I think the show definitely realizes the double standard of sexism with its different commentary, which is good, but a lot of viewers miss this idea even though a lot of the show focuses on women. Now, we established that this dynamic is a double standard, but if you look at the fandom, there are a lot of people that don't realize this. I've gotten comments like these on my videos before, people calling Rhaenyra a whore, but the interesting thing is that these comments are pretty rare. You won't see too many people just straight up calling Rhaenyra a slut. That's outright distasteful, and when you say that, you do sound outright misogynistic and hateful as well. Instead, these ideas manifest within memes and passing comments. For example, there's a lot of memes and references of Rhaenyra being obese and gigantic. In the books, Rhaenyra gained some weight from birthing a whole bunch of children, which is natural. She's never described as getting gigantic or anything like that, but you can definitely find these memes and jokes of her being huge. These memes are based off of the books. Rhaenyra in the show is relatively thin after having 6 kids, which is fine. That's not the issue. The issue is that in the books, Viserys died because of how big he was. He dies under his own weight, pretty much. The Maester stated that he couldn't even walk and had a hard time really doing anything before he lost his breath. Yet, I don't see too many posts mocking him for his size. I'm not saying that book Viserys should be mocked for his obesity, but it does point out another double standard, which is related to the slut shaming talked about earlier. For Rhaenyra, her looks are valued much more than a man's, to the point where her being overweight at all stands out much more than other male characters. Even Aegon himself is described as getting puffy and bloated as the war goes on. But Rhaenyra is the princess. She's supposed to be desirable physically, and if she's not, then it's somehow a moral failure. But things like this do point out that not only do these things matter in the House of Dragon, but the real world as well. You might also see some other type of memes where Rhaenyra is called a thought or a whore in passing. While in the world the show is placed in, Rhaenyra would definitely be considered a whore. But if that's the case, then so is Aegon and Viserys and Daemon. And that's the big thing about all of this, the framing. Some people passively think of Rhaenyra as being a whore, although the label can be applied to multiple people. They may not even realize that they're thinking this way. But because of how the show frames Rhaenyra, then it becomes hard for them to take her out of that box. Don't get me wrong, I think House of the Dragon does a decent job of addressing the sexism that happens, but some people don't realize the social commentary that's going on and just adopt the idea that Rhaenyra just loves to sleep around. This manifests itself in memes and jokes, which makes it so that Rhaenyra is clowned for being fat and a whore, while Viserys was objectively fatter and had more partners, but we get no memes or discourse about it. The way in which Rhaenyra is presented changes the way we perceive reality regarding how she actually is. If we're shown the concept that she's promiscuous over and over again, then it starts to change the way we view reality regarding her character and her actual traits and circumstances. Now, if people want to post memes, then go ahead. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm just saying that a lot of the time there's a reason as to why Rhaenyra is being presented in these ways, even if it's presented as a joke. I'm not trying to police others, but more so pointing out relationship between the slut shaming I see on the show and what I see online. I think it's good to realize that this is indeed a thing. A lot of misogyny does get banned, and most people aren't blatantly misogynist, but a lot of this stuff does go under the cracks of moderation. I see a lot of Alicent versus Rhaenyra, but sometimes it's better to see how both of their opposing views are the thesis and antithesis toward the system that they live in.